Does a person have time when he dies to realize that he has died? It turns out that yes, he does have time. New evidence suggests that in the process of dying, we become aware that we are dying because the brain continues to function for some time after the heart stops beating. An American scientist and doctor asked 2,060 people from different countries who had suffered a cardiac arrest and heard something unexpected. It is true that some of his colleagues were wary of his discovery. This article comes from the Swedish newspaper Aftonbladet. The author of the article, Lars Hermansson, Ulrika Hermansson, new discoveries show that in the process of dying, we realize we are dying because our brain continues to function for some time after the heart stops. The feeling of being close to death is perhaps the most brilliant thing a person can experience. Often this phenomenon is described that the whole life passes before their eyes. A person sees a bright tunnel or feels that he is outside the body. He seems to be in contact with relatives and friends from the other side. But what is really going on? Dr. Sam Parnia, scientist and intensive care physician from New York, decided to conduct a study on this with 2,060 people from Europe and the US. Many patients who had suffered a cardiac arrest told him what they had experienced. It turned out that 46% of them remember after the recovery process. The majority had lost their memories. The most expected thing was that 2 of the patients retained detailed and memories, visual and auditory, in the intensive care unit and watched as the doctors announced their death. This was after a full 3 minutes after the heart had stopped beating. The brain was functioning, and the EEG had recorded no electrical oscillations. Simply put, dead. Could consciousness exist independently of normal brain function? Swedish scientific thinker Henrik Hjortell, associate professor of neurobiology at Lund University, is very cautious. He said, "This study is somewhat suspect. I must tell you, since almost all Western medicine defines death by the concept of brain death, Sam Parnia's discussion of brain death is completely precluded by his research by the fact that the brain does not function at all after cardiac arrest. Brain death is defined as the absence of brain activity, with at least 2 tests performed at 2-hour intervals. If the heart stops beating, it does not mean the brain is dead forever, even though complete cardiac arrest leads to brain death within 5 to 10 minutes. Cardiac arrest means complete deprivation of oxygen, followed by an extremely strong signal from the brain. At this time, the brain will not function normally, and it's doubtful that in such a state there is any kind of consciousness. Probably for a few minutes, consciousness exists, just like when one is asleep, and there are some strange experiences like those that happen in a dream," says Henrik Hjortell. Memories like dreams. There is evidence that after cardiac arrest, we remain conscious much longer than scientists think. Another case and explanation of this phenomenon concerns the dreamlike sensations that arise immediately before we lose consciousness. The mystery of death lies in the fact that we simply cannot know what happens when we die, and the research continues. But one thing is clear: one day we will all know. The only question is whether we will remember. Locked man syndrome. A patient with locked man syndrome fully retains consciousness and normal brain activity but cannot control his body and therefore speak and move. I guess it's something like sleep paralysis, right? He looks like he's dead. It's not exactly known exactly what happens, but it seems to be important for the brain to constantly check that the body is working. The brain is unconsciously exercised day and night so that we do not lose vital consciousness. Even in deepest sleep, a state of faint consciousness, there are mechanisms in the brain that can naturally lead us to sleep. These mechanisms are very reliable and stable, but they can break. Locked man syndrome is very unpleasant, but fortunately rare condition. What is brain death? Brain death is a clinical term used in almost all Western medicine. Thanks to the concept of brain death, we can now perform transplants. To determine brain death, the following criteria must be met. During 2 clinical measurements by an expert in the diagnosis of brain death over a period of at least 2 hours, no brain functions were recorded. All basic reflexes are absent, pupil reaction, pain reaction, eye movements, and breathing movements do not appear. The cause of brain damage is known, for example, physical trauma or bleeding. Exceptions to the finding of brain death can be made in the case of difficult situations such as severe hypothermia, poisoning, drug overdose, etc. And then, according to the law, to declare brain death, and in addition to all of the above, a cerebral angiogram, something like a contrast X-ray of the cerebral vessels, is required. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.